Hey everybody, it's Mike over here at Growtopia. And I got some interesting things that I'm going to be starting today, from a type of plant to some pumpkins. Now, there's also going to be a little information about a heritage that I come from. And it's an Irish heritage. Hence the hat, the shirt, medallion, and the back of the shirt. And I'm also going to be informing you guys who don't know of certain different traditions that a lot of us all do. Now, we're going to start off really quickly, and then we'll jump down to the traditions. The first one we have is coleus. Now, coleus is a stunning perennial plant. The thing with coleus is that it likes to only be in a shaded spot. So it requires partial shade. It takes 10 to 14 days to germinate, 70 to 75 degrees soil temperature. You want to sow them indoors 8 to 12 weeks before your last frost, so this is a perfect time to do it. And it's going to go on the same shelf with the pumpkins, one tray only, and it's great. They like to be well watered until established. Harden plants off, don't do that. Transplant into rich soil after danger of frost has passed. Now, because they like partial shade, sometimes on your property, like mine for example, it's really hard to find partial shade. So it might be a plant that you can actually keep indoors, which is what you can do, or you can find a spot somewhere that's closer to the house so it can get on its own and you leave it there. The color of the leaves, because this is a rainbow mix, we're looking at yellow, green, pink, red, and deep maroon. They also thrive in containers and also makes a lovely house plant. Now, I don't mind it growing indoors, but I like for it to grow outdoors as well. So I'm going to be hunting around as the season comes. Now, if you don't know if you have a partial shaded spot at all, and you're planning on growing something that is a partial shade plant, I would say before you invest your money into it, watch the whole summer season and see exactly where your best partial shade. Because as the season goes on and the months go on, the sun likes to move around, and something that might be partial shade for a couple months is all of a sudden full-blown sun. So you really want to watch where you're going with that. Sometimes the best place to stick a partial shaded plant like this one is actually under a tree, like a fruit tree. So like my apple trees. There's certain parts of Growtopia that's out there. I mean, this whole area is Growtopia, but the one main section out there, the orchard, is a nice spot. I'm not going to throw it in a greenhouse. I might have it near the greenhouse, because there's a section outside the door where I go to the greenhouses where it's partial shade majority of the time, and I think it would actually look really beautiful there. It'd be like a nice addition, so honestly I might stick it there. But let's get to dropping these seeds and moving on to something more interesting. So they like a 16th of an inch in. Basically like a nice little dusting, almost like when you're doing carrots. Just a little bit. A lot of little tiny black seeds in there. Okay, now for the next things that are interesting. And we have pumpkins. Now, why am I starting pumpkins now? In my book, I have pumpkins in March. And when I started trying to do pumpkins in March, they just didn't seem like they had enough time to germinate. And of course, I was getting them in at different times, and I was planting them later and later and later. And not germinate, but actually produce. And they did germinate, and they got close to producing. I had watermelons that were the same way, but I planted them way too late. So I'm going to start them early. And we got a couple different varieties here. We have the blue pumpkin. We have the spooky blend for you Halloweenies. We have the Jack Be Little. We have Casper the pumpkin. Should be funny if it said the pumpkin, which would be great. Then we have Jack O' Lantern, which I'm going to explain to you guys what that is about. And the next one we have is looks like a brownish pumpkin, and it is the Fairy Tale pumpkin. Now, before we start dropping our seed, let me give you guys a little insight of how the jack-o'-lantern came about. Now, it's actually extremely interesting. So, in American history, jack-o'-lantern was really nothing that was about. It only happened in the early 1800s. Irish immigrants who came to America brought their tradition and spread it into America. Now, originally, jack-o'-lantern actually goes back to an Irish heritage, Irish tradition. And it's actually, sometimes it's pronounced, depending on where you look at it, it's either Samhain or Samhain. And it's a celebration where you celebrate your dead, your ancestors, your family members, your friends, your your pets that have passed. Bleh, say that 10 times fast. And in some rituals, they actually invite the spirits of their loved ones who had passed to the ritual for the night. Now, it basically happens October 31st, late at night in the evening, between the autumn equinox and the summer solstice. So it's basically just before, basically what they're doing is we're celebrating the end of a harvest season into winter. Now, it's not that we're celebrating the end of harvest. What we're actually celebrating is a tradition that you might have heard before is known as Stingy Jack. Now, Stingy Jack was a blacksmith in Ireland. And basically, he was the kind of person that was a trickster. He was a scumbag. He was the kind of person who would steal from his family and keep it from himself. And it's an ancient Celtic festival, like I said before, known as Samhain or Samhain, whichever way you want to pronounce it. And Stingy Jack is basically doomed to wander the earth for the rest of his existence. How it really started about was because October 31st, Irish people believe that the barrier between the living and the dead become very fragile. And to ward off evil spirits, back in Ireland, people used to carve faces into turnips. Now, I don't know if you guys had a turnip before, but a turnip is extremely hard to carve into, let alone just cut. And they would carve a face into a turnip, and they'd put a candle inside of it, and they'd put it outside their house. The reason why is because Stingy Jack, because he made a lot of bad decisions from stealing from people, relatives, and so on and so forth, he was basically wandering the earth with a turnip that had a glowing light inside of it. Now, how does that come about? Well, when Jack eventually died, he made a deal with the devil. And he promised the devil that if he did certain things, that the devil could not take his soul. Now, there's a lot of different in-betweens and stuff where, you know, some people say, oh, well, you know, he turned the devil into a coin. He put the coin in his pocket so that he can pay back his sins or use his sins. And then at one point, he locked his wallet with a cross. There's times that people talked about as well that Jack basically promised the devil something and then, you know, strapped him into a tree or an apple tree and stole the devil's power. Basically, long story short is that Jack actually somehow or another managed to bamboozle the devil into, after granting him multiple wishes and stuff, that he basically allowed himself not to be able to go to hell. And he just bamboozled the devil over and over again. So when Jack finally, and this actually, I'm sorry, that was a little bit before when Jack died. So when Jack finally died, after tricking the devil multiple times, the devil, you know, had finally, after one of his last promises, had said, okay, you know, I'm not going to take your soul. So Jack ends up dying, and Jack starts off and goes to heaven. And God says, no, I don't want you here because of his sinful ways. So God goes, you're going to hell. So Jack goes to hell. Well, Jack can't go to hell because the devil said that he promised not to take his soul. But what the devil did do in hand was to even make matters worse for Jack, was that Satan actually tossed Jack a burning piece of coal, which then he ended up putting into a turnip and carved it into a lantern. Which is why in Ireland, the tradition is to carve a face out of a lantern, out of a turnip, put a candle inside of it, and put it outside your house to ward off Jack. I know it sounds crazy, but when it came to the United States, people in the United States realized it's really hard to carve into a turnip, which then turned into the pumpkin. Now, why did they choose a pumpkin? Well, basically because pumpkins and turnips are usually around the same time at the end of harvest. See, in Ireland as well, turnips are basically the end of season. Now, like our turnips did as well. At the end of our season, the turnips were ready to be harvested. Well, in America, pumpkins are a very big item that we grow. So pumpkins were simple because it was a gourd. Now, you could do gourds as well, random gourds as well. But a pumpkin is in the gourd family. And you can carve it. You can even carve a gourd. Some of the gourds look a little interesting if you want to carve a face in them. I'm not going to get into it. I don't know if you guys seen some gourds before. I've seen some gourds before. They don't look like anything you should be... We're just going to leave it at that. So once people realize that the pumpkins were easy to carve into, that's where the pumpkins, a lot of them that are big, like the jack-o'-lantern or the jack-be-little, because of the way they're grown, you can carve into them very easily, and hence where jack-o'-lanterns came from. Now, a lot of people, they carve them to this day. They don't put candles inside of them. I did when I was younger. I haven't done it in years because I just haven't done it. Now, one of the things with pumpkins that people don't realize is that a lot of times, which drives me nuts, is people spend so much money on pumpkins, they carve them with their family, and then they throw them out. Well, you're doing a major problem, right? You're wasting your money. On a spent pumpkin, you can turn it into pumpkin puree, which I'll be doing this year, and I'll be filming how to do that. You can harvest the seeds from it when you buy it, and you can grow your own pumpkins. You can harvest the seeds, and you can roast them in your oven and have fresh pumpkin seeds, which are amazing. There's so much you could do with pumpkins, and I hate when I drive around and I see them on the side of the road, and I'm like, there's so much that you can get out of that pumpkin, and people just throwing away their money. It's sad to see these days. You can make pumpkin bread from scratch. I'm going to be doing that this year, and also pumpkin pie, as long as my pumpkins take off, which I'm going to be focusing on my pumpkins because I want them to take off. I want to go back to my Irishness, my Irish roots. Now, before we start dropping into this, there are a couple things I do have to mention. In Europe, the tradition was the same, but it was actually called Will of the Wise. Will of the Wisp. the tradition of Jack-o'-lantern, aka Stingy Jack, they had their own style. In Italy, in Norway, in Spain, in Switzerland, children would leave a bowl of milk or cream out, and it was considered Jack-o' the bowl. So there is a little bit of different variations. Why did America never have it? Well, America was kind of like a melting pot, and it got into a melting pot even more when the 1800s came about, and then some. So anyway, with a little bit of that history, I hope I didn't lose anybody. Let's get to planting our pumpkins. So, like I said, we got our first one here, which is our blue pumpkins. And the seeds are not blue. I hope they were. Now, pumpkin seeds are nice and big, and there's not a lot that come in a pack. So what I'm going to be doing right now is I'm going to be grabbing 2 seeds and putting 2 seeds in per hole. Okay. Now you could do 3, you could do 4, but I'm just going to do 2 for now. Next one we got is our spooky blend. Now I feel like the spooky blend, by the looks of it, definitely has a lot of different types of seeds. So I'm going to put 1, 2, 3, because I see 3 different types so far. 1, 2, I'll show you guys that quick here. Seeing. Come on, fall between my fingers. You can see that there's a couple different types of seeds in here. And the next one we have is Jack Be Little, Jack Be Quick. Jack fell over his little stick. What makes them different? Jack Be Little, an adorable tiny pumpkin, 3 to 4 inches wide, 2 inches tall. Also make pumpkins good for decorations, but also delicious to eat. And I gotta buy some stock in the freaking glue they're using here. Holy Christmas. What the fuck? Guys, lay off the glue. Put it in a Ziploc bag for crying out loud here. Oh my god, it's like the worst one yet. Okay, now that I butchered the top of it, 95 days till maturity, 7 to 14 days, direct sow, full sun. Even though I'm doing kind of like partial sun, I'm doing 6 hours on this tray at I think 75 degrees is where I'm going to set it at, so it kind of like it's right in between for the coleus and the pumpkins. And then once the coleus starts taking off, I'm going to change the sun or the light amount for these guys, and then the coleus are just going to go somewhere in here till they're ready to go out there. What am I doing? I'm like, I'm going to pour it in. I'm going to pour the whole bag in there just trying to put a couple seeds in. What am I doing? I get excited. Jack Be Little, Jack Be Quick. Alright. Next one we have is the Casper pumpkin. This ornamentally has a ghostly white skin. Makes it fun for painting or carving. Carving. Reaches about 10 to 15 pounds and 8 to 12 inches around. The sweet orange flesh works well for baking and other culinary uses. Oh, humbug. Full sun, 70 to 90 degrees. Best is directly sown into warm soil, but can be started indoors 3 to 4 weeks early in areas of short growing season. Grow in mounds, plenty of water, fertilizer, yada 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 yada. So I believe that the other bag of pumpkin seeds, here's those big orange ones. So those are obviously the Caspers. These are big seeds. Because I had orange ones in the spooky blend. Next we have is the Jack-o'-lantern. 105 days till harvest. It says 4 seeds per group. I'm doing a little less than that. Full sun, plenty of heat. Water at the roots. They are heavy feeders. Pumpkins are extremely heavy feeders. So obviously by the size of them, they're obviously going to be heavy feeders. So when it comes down to watering next season, I might be actually installing another watering system within the orchard that is just for the pumpkins alone, so that they get more water than everybody else, because some of the plants don't need a lot of water. Or I might just step it up, because last year I started noticing that my tomatoes and my peppers and my cucumbers were having some water issues. They didn't have enough water. They're taking the water from their fruit so the plant would survive. So that means I'm going to have to up my watering this year. And as soon as you start seeing the fruit on the plant, that's when you really want to start kicking it up a notch. And last but not least, we have our fairy tale pumpkin. 120 days till maturity. It's funny, it says best start out. Yeah, this does say best start outdoors. Same thing, heavy feeders. So, being that these guys are heavy feeders, I already know that the watering for just these plants alone are going to be a lot more watering on this side than on the side of the coleuses. Okay. I need one more seed. One more seed. Oakley dokley. Alright. Let's put everybody in order here. I write them up off camera. I'm not playing. Where did he go? Alright, so for plants, for the coleuses, I did 3 of them. I did 2 blues, 2 spooky, 2 Jack B. Littles, 2 Caspers, 2 Jack-o'-lanterns, and 2 fairy tales. And if all the seeds germinate, I'm going to have a lot of pumpkins. So I might be selling some pumpkins or giving them away. Nevertheless, I'm going to stick these guys down into the ground, update the book, update the Bible with all the information that's needed. Hope you guys got something out of it. I hope you like, subscribe, share it with your friends and family. They got a little bit of insight into different things and different heritage and why I love doing what I do. Anyway, this is Mike over here at Growtopia. Keep growing on because you know I will be. Have a great night. Later.